Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next The Reckoning of Roku chapter analysis video. This one is going to be for chapter 15, which is called A Hurt So Deep. So, again, YouTube channel membership is enabled if you want to help support the channel, and subscribing also helps, but we'll jump in here. So, we're back to Roku and Gyatso, and of course they're hiking kind of through the island, and they've just kind of come over the crest and have found more or less, okay, this is the path. And we find out pretty early on here that they find tracks from the earthbender group here. And Gyatso's like, whoa, this guy must be a giant. Do you think you can take him? Roku is like, hey, I'm not here to fight anyone overall. But they figure out, okay, there must be like 7 or 8 of them here. It's a few days ago, but we can follow it. And because they're following a trail that's just been made, their progress is a lot quicker than the original kind of progress, because they don't need to cut through all the undergrowth and stuff like that, so it's a little bit quicker. As they're talking, we get the idea here that they bring up, hey, a lot of this isn't really lining up with what Sozin said about the mission. This is Gyatso saying this to Roku, kind of questioning Sozin, which is that, hey, I thought we were meant to find like an Earth Kingdom military outpost here, like a fortress, something more permanent than like these temporary camps, and more of a sense that there's actually like a small army here rather than maybe half a dozen people at most. Something is not exactly clear if this is meant to be the Earth Kingdom trying to like expand its borders, steal an entire island. There'd be way more people here if that was what was actually going on here. So what is actually going on? So Roku is forced to kind of tackle the idea of like I don't think he would lie to me, but in a way, what would it mean if Sozin was willing to lie to him? If he couldn't trust his closest friend in the world, who could he trust? That's the sort of idea here. And he's like, he's confident Sozin has been honest with him, but if not, it's not a question he really wants to answer necessarily. We get a scene cut here as they kind of set up camp and then kind of head on their way again. And this is where we get to the next sort of more, the next section of the friendship between Gyatso and Roku. So they get to talking about, hey, Roku's like, hey, you really have never played Pai Sho. So that's an interesting detail with Gyatso, who we know later on will play Pai Sho, I guess, somewhat regularly with Aang. But here he has actually never played Pai Sho. The implication here is, I guess, Gyatso eventually turns around from his unwillingness to want to play here to, I guess, Roku does teach him. And that's where Gyatso's interest in Pai Sho comes from. We again get reference to the idea of like, oh yeah, Sozin and Roku used to play a lot. Gyatso's like, you usually lost, right? But Roku says, I held my own. Gyatso doesn't think he's telling the truth, but we know from the Sozin point of view chapters, he actually is. Sozin even admits that most of the games between himself and Roku end in draws, but actually the last time they played, Roku beat him, so interesting. But anyway, then we get to the idea of, oh, hey, I'll teach you to play Pai Sho if you teach me to play airball someday when I eventually actually do airbending. This makes kind of Gyatso kind of a little bit sad because his airbending is so inconsistent. He kind of feels, I might never be able to play airball again if my airbending doesn't come back to the right level, basically. And I really like that game. So the mention of like playing it brings the sadness to light for Gyatso here. So this is where Roku's like, okay, now do you want to talk about what's going on here? You didn't want to talk about it before. I guess you actually do want to talk about it now. So this is Gyatso and his kind of reflections on the sort of loss of consistent airbending. He says, I was the youngest air nomad to master the 18th tier in decades. I was even on track to earn my arrows by the time I reached your age. If you can believe it, I can, Roku says. But after Yama died, everything changed. I can't channel the peace and calm I need to focus my energy like I could before. Now my spirit feels so uncentered, broken, angry. I'm not sure how to describe it. So, some interesting stuff here. The 18th tier of airbending. This is referencing, I believe, the 36 tiers of airbending that's been referenced, like, in much older material. I think it's, what's the thing with Aang, where, like, he got to the point where, like, he mastered, what was it, 35 out of 36 of them, but, like, he was considered so good, they gave him the tattoos beforehand, especially because he'd created a technique. But it's just bringing that up again, like, the older lore here, rarely referenced, but being brought to light here. So Gyatso, at a relatively young age here, is, you know, he got past the 18th one, no problem. And obviously this is when what happened to Yama happened, and it has slowed his progress from being this amazing prodigy to, will he be able to get back to that level ever at all? So then we get, his own perception of how, what's actually happening here is he can't channel the peace and calm. He feels uncentered, broken, angry because of the loss of his sister Yama. So that makes sense. This is very much in line with the idea of these more, I suppose, negative emotions kind of like tainting his free airbender spirit, and so that is affecting his bending and kind of everything related to that, as we saw with the Sky Bison connection, even with Lola. But Roku says, you know, I know what you mean. And again, we get the connection between the two. If they both lost someone recently in their past. And Gyatso's like, hey, you felt something like that when you lost Yasu, yes, but it went away. And Roku says, not entirely, but it became less consistent. Gyatso then says, but there's a big part of me that doesn't want that, you know? That feels like if I stop grieving for my sister, even for a moment, that means I'm forgetting her. And so we get into then the air nomad philosophy on these things, which is, this is the one aspect that even Gyatso struggles with. It's the idea of the monks are reminding me that everything is temporary. But if reconnecting with my airbending means I need to stop loving Yama, maybe it's not worth it. And Roku's like, yeah, your people do love the principle of detachment. And he's like, yeah, we really do. And Roku's trying to figure out the right thing to say here. Of like, should he just say the sort of expected thing when someone's dealing with loss? Or like, and he notes in a way the idea of the stuff that he has heard over and over again since Yasu's death, immediately after Yasu's death, that didn't really help Roku during that time. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I have to say something that is more from the years of actually dealing with this that will actually help him. And he says, maybe you don't need to stop loving her to find your balance again. Maybe it's that you need to figure out what it means to love her when she's no longer with you. And so this actually hits Gyatso. Like, he's like, oh, wow, like, you're not as foolish as everyone says, Avatar Roku. So Roku replies, of course, with, thanks, Airbender Gyatso. And then it's like, oh, you've opened up to me. I should open up to you about something similar. Do you want to know what Sister Disha told me about, like, why I can't learn airbending yet? And Gyatso's like, no, I already know. It's pretty obvious. And Roku's like, no, it's not. Gyatso then uses his staff to basically knock the headpiece off Roku's head, and he's kind of splashing around in a puddle on the ground, and they get back up, and you think this might cause an argument, but they just start laughing because it's like, oh, I guess you do get it, that in a way it's the artifact representing to a certain degree Roku's attachment to his home nation, and that kind of being part of the problem. But that is the chapter as we come to an end. Now, that is not the full exploration of the whole Yama Yasu kind of situation, but it's just the idea that Gyatso finally has this moment where he did open up to Roku and actually really appreciated the advice that Roku had for him. That idea, and it's actually quite nicely kind of worded. It's the idea, figure out what it means to love her when she's no longer with you. That you don't need to just detach yourself from that connection, but it's adjust to that kind of connection now that she is gone. And that's an interesting one. That's the kind of way to kind of view it. It's maybe not some of those, like they mention here, shallow cliches about this sort of thing, but this is from Roku's own experience dealing with the loss of his brother. This is what has kind of got him through it, and I do like that. I think that's definitely well constructed, and obviously this is why Disha placed the two of them together with the hope of like Roku has mostly managed to get past what has happened with Yasu, and in a way, can you help him get past this yourself? So it seems to be working. So that is the chapter here. Again, you would say maybe the pacing here, it's maybe a little bit sort of slow in terms of like we've had like what 4-ish chapters now of them in or around on the island. Now, again, my point that I said in one of the earlier chapters is that like we kind of need this time because of what they're going to do in not too many chapters. We need to get a lot of the dynamic between the characters kind of explored now. And you know, it's the main Avatar companion dynamic. I think we need to spend some time on it, so it's the right time and place, I think, to do it ultimately. But overall, definitely pretty good stuff here of just a lot of the dynamics you're expecting to coming into play here, of just the fact that Sozin has lied about a major part of why this is all happening. Roku's now beginning to question that a little bit, but he's a little bit annoyed that Gyatso is maybe questioning Sozin, and if Sozin has been honest to him, and how's that going to come out if maybe more questioning happens. But the two of them do actually seem to get on really, really well. You see Gyatso's worry is that, like, what if I don't ever fix my airbending problem? But Roku's advice already a little bit helpful, so interesting stuff. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are in this chapter, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.